Hi guys, welcome back to Trail Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Shimmons. Thanks for coming back to our trail and ultra running show. This week I have special guest Fiona Pascall in the studio after finishing fifth place at the Western States 100. So we're going to let Fiona into the room in a second, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Before we get there, I'm going to say thank you to our sponsors, XMiles. Check out the link in the description or in the bio for 10% off at XMiles, all your race nutrition and all that type of stuff. And also, new partner, our official race vest partner, Tantrums, the vibiest vests in the game, trail challenger brand. Check them out. 15% exclusive discount for Trail Talk viewers and listeners. Again, you know where to get that link. And yeah, I think that's it. So let's go and chat with Fiona. Fiona Pascall, welcome to Trail Talk. Thanks so much for coming on the show. After just getting back, I think, from California, you're in the UK now. So let's kick it off and just see how you feeling.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Thanks very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm feeling all right. I think the journey home wasn't ideal for post 100 miles. I flew on the Monday, and my legs swelled up a lot, and I was very, very uncomfortable. But as of kind of today, I've just got one sore toe, and everything else seems fine.
Yeah, I flew on Monday as well, and I didn't run 100 miles. So yeah, that like travel socks and compression is nearly a must for that type of travel, never mind after an ultra. But you had been out in the US for a long time. I'm gonna say it was about 6 weeks or so. So it would be great to like hear something about that. So why don't we start there?
Yeah. I was really lucky that I can work a little bit from anywhere, so I was able to take quite a lot of time, and I wanted to give the course the proper amount of respect, and I wanted to acclimatize, run on the course, get used to the heat, get used to the altitude, everything like that. So we made it work. So we got out there, yeah, about 6 weeks ago, and we bought a roof tent from Craigslist the day that we got out. Sort of figured out a way to attach it to the hire car, and then yeah, we've just been camping on the course until about a week or 10 days before the race. So it's been pretty ideal acclimatization, and we've been able to literally sleep on the course once or twice. So I've managed to see a lot of it.
That's pretty epic that you rolled the dice and got a tent box for the car. I did see that on your Instagram, and I was chatting with Ricky about it, and we were sort of saying that, yeah, like is the modern version, or this is the current version of the trail running dirt bag, where it's like car camping on the course instead of, 10 years ago, the way Anton maybe would have been doing it. So it did look like you were getting some proper good training, heat training, and also it had to be pretty chill and relaxing, just by the river, camping and cooking and just basically living the life there. But you're also working.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to work a huge amount. We were lucky enough to have internet for a lot of it, actually. There was a few places where we didn't have any, but there was a lot of going to cafes and getting a load of work done. But yeah, I was at one point sitting on the Western States course having a meeting on my laptop, which was pretty special. So it's definitely the kind of modern version. We thought about getting a normal tent and just having a car and a tent, but the tent box just a little bit more comfortable. It just kind of ups the luxury slightly.
Yeah. Before we get into the race and how that went down, I'm not familiar with your background and entry into running, so maybe we could just spend a couple of minutes there and get an idea of your kind of athletic background and how you came to now run the Western States 100.
Yeah, I don't really have much of an athletics background, to be honest. I've always done quite a lot of sort of exercise and sport. I've always run a little bit, done a little bit of mountain biking, a little bit of climbing, a little bit of skiing, ski touring, things like that. But I only really got into ultra running in sort of 2020, 2021. I guess alongside a lot of other people. I started probably running more during the lockdowns. Um, and then I watched my sister do the Bob Graham round in 2020. And that kind of inspired me to do one myself. So then I did the Bob Graham round in 2021. And then from there, that's when the kind of addiction started, I guess.
Well, you were already fairly deep if you if you did the bob, and then your addiction was kicking in. Sometimes it might take people a decade or more of trail and fell running and things before they get to the point of going for a bob. And also, you mentioned there about ski touring, and anyone that's from the UK that has does any ski touring or has dipped their toe into that is definitely someone that is well versed in the outdoors, because you have to go out of your way to do that. It's not on our doorstep, so to speak.
Yeah, that's true. I've lived in ski resorts for a few years, so I was doing it there. But yeah, no, I guess I had a base before I started, I guess you could say. I knew about mountains and I knew I liked mountains, and I've always had a level of endurance, I suppose.
I have to say, it's pretty cool that it was Beth, your sister, that essentially has inspired you to go the ultra route. I think that's just lovely to hear, because a lot of the times, we hear. I was almost sick of hearing it in the months leading up to Western States, that every time your name was mentioned, it was mentioned alongside Beth, having, your sister as a previous champion. And whenever I reached out to the Trail Talk community in our WhatsApp group, you know, chatting with Fiona tomorrow, is there anything that you want to ask? And one of the questions was, ask Fiona, does she ever get sick of being asked about, the comparison to Beth? Because, it's something that we always hear in the commentary as such, as we did even on the live stream. The American commentary was trying to find synergies, and I think they settled on, fastest siblings now to have run the Western States. You know how the Americans love like a metric or a statement like that, something
I
to
love
a story, I suppose.
that. Yeah, I guess I wasn't really following along the Western States hype because I don't really deal with that very well. But yeah, it was. I don't get annoyed with it. It's interesting that I think the reason that people stated that I might do well at Western States was that Beth had done well. I don't think I ever heard anything about my previous history or anything as a kind of reason stated. Um, so it's quite funny, really. But no, I don't know if people compare me to Beth behind my back more than they do in front of me, because I don't really hear it that much. But I just completely understandable, really. She's the big name, so I don't get annoyed by it at all. I still see Beth as the athlete in the family, so I guess I don't really compare myself to Beth. She's a far more sort of committed and strong athlete than I probably will ever be.
Yeah. Well, your resume at this stage sort of speaks for itself. Uh, I think prior to accepting your ticket after Chianti, you were planning on running Lavaredo, and then was the plan to go back to UTMB?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Chianti was a kind of accident. I wasn't supposed to be there. because I had a slight niggle in through the winter, and I was supposed to be doing Trans-Gran Canaria, then Lavaredo, then UTMB. And I just needed one extra month before racing. So I didn't do Trans-Gran Canaria, chose Chianti because it was going to be competitive, but not because I wanted a golden ticket. And then, yeah, the golden ticket kind of put a bit of a spanner in the works and everything changed.
Yeah, well, that race had so much media hype with the Killian and Jim showdown, and then you went and had a fantastic race and dominant result, really. Um, and then all of the talk was, will Fiona accept the ticket? How long did it take you to make that decision?
Well, you have 2 weeks, and it took me a week and 6 days.
Okay.
Yeah, I was sure. I was 100% sure I wasn't going to take it until a few days afterwards, and then just a few things kind of came into place that made me realize that maybe I could, because I didn't realize that Salomon might support me. It didn't sort of cross my mind that that was going to be an option. So I thought I'd be paying for the trip myself, which I couldn't really have done. And I didn't want to just go out, the week before and just do the race kind of for fun. If I wanted to do Western States, I wanted to do it properly. So it took a long time to kind of figure out whether it was a possibility to go out there and, recce and acclimatize and all of that.
So let's move on and talk a little bit about the race now. You had a fantastic fifth place finish, and it was 11 minutes slower than Beth's winning time, which just shows like every year these, like, the finishing times just get faster and faster and faster. But you had a fantastic race in a really close and competitive women's field. How did you feel going into it, and like what were your objectives for the day?
Well, to start with, I just want to clarify, when Beth won in 2021, the highest temperature was 45 degrees. It was the third hottest year on record. So I think she would have won this year if the temperature was the same. I still think that was one of the most impressive races in Western States history, because it was a completely different kettle of fish. I think as soon as the temperature goes over body temperature, then things start getting really, really messy. So I think comparing this year to her year is maybe a little unfair. But yeah, I was really, really happy with fifth position. I was really happy with my time. The aim was top 10. Well, in fact, I tried not to have too strong an external aim. The aim was to be calm on the start line, finish strong, be sensible throughout. And if top 10 happened, then that was perfect, because I wanted to come back next year. I want it to be at least a 2-year project.
Okay, so that was my next question. So the plan was to learn it and experience it and race it by feel, and then go back next year and see what else you can get out of yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's really interesting. So let's talk about the race itself. The race set off, and it was, I mean, it was beautiful weather early on. It did get hot later in the day. I think it was maybe up 38, 39, um, in the canyons. How did you feel in the high country, in terms of, you know, how does that suit your strengths, and how were you running? What was the field like, and generally, what was the atmosphere?
It was amazing. I hadn't done, from the escarpment to Red Star Ridge is the only section of the course that I hadn't looked at. So that was really fun to do that for the first time. Um, I'm not a very fast runner. Like, I would never win a 50K race, for example. So it suited me just to kind of, you know, dawdle along and go up the escarpment fairly slowly and just enjoy that time. That it was slightly more technical in that section than later on in the race, so that suited me. So I was quite happy kind of running down towards Red Star, I guess, fairly quickly. But yeah, it was loads of fun. And I was surrounded by women, which is really rare in a race because normally there are so many men throughout the field. But this field, it seemed as though all of the elite men went out really, really fast. So they were just gone. And then the elite women were all in a kind of group of our own. So that was really lovely. I managed to run a few strides with quite a few different women. It was really nice. And like you say, it was nice and cool. So that was something to take advantage of. I felt great. I'm always a little bit nervous the first 2 hours of a race because in my experience, that's when things go wrong for me. It's either seems to be the very beginning. And then if the food's going in and if my glycogen stores don't run out in the first hour and a half, 2 hours, then I kind of think I'm going to be okay. So getting past that 2 hours spot was a bit of a relief.
So it's interesting that you pointed that out about the way the field had separated. I was up on the escarpment and I was crewing Ricky Wynn, who you ran a little bit with, and you're right, there was this 15-ish group of guys that came through, and then it was the elite women, and then it was Ricky and not that many more people, and then there was a big gap to the kind of the next group, whoever they were. I guess the start of the mid pack, maybe it would have been, but it was really interesting how that natural separation just happened on this 4 to 5 kilometer section, and so let's go into like the high country and talk about that first sort of 50K through to Robinson Flat. What was the mental strategy and how did it unfold?
The plan was to not race. The plan was to cruise the first 6 hours at least. And I did that. And it's really easy to get caught up with, overtaking people and being overtaken and things. But I just really focused on letting it happen and running at my own pace, not overdoing it. And I was really happy with how that happened because especially on the descents, I could have gone quite a lot faster. I could have raced people who were overtaking me and I didn't. So I was really pleased with myself about that. And it started getting fairly warm at Duncan Canyon, but not hot at all. But again, I was really pleased that I had a plan in place to get an ice bandana, get some ice in my pack, and cool off there. And I was really pleased that I gave it the time to do that because I think that helped later on because the body temperature never got that high.
You're coached by Martin Cox, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
So what sort of conversations did you have with Martin about sort of race strategy and the cooling in particular?
It's the same with everything. You eat before you get hungry, you drink before you get dehydrated, you start cooling before you overheat. So I think that was the plan, just to never let it get to the point where I have to cool down immediately. We talked about being a bit conservative, not running to win, not getting caught up in the race, and just focusing on self-care for the first at least half of the race. So that was the plan, and I think I did what I was told.
So coming into that to Robinson Flat, how did you feel? Did you feel like you had burnt any matches, or were you just simply cruising?
No, yeah, I felt great. Yeah, I think we'd just run up a fairly decent hill, and it's not a very comfortable climb, that one, because it's a little bit more technical. But I was running with Ricky at that point actually, and Emily Horgood, and I know that Emily's really, really good at pacing as well. So I just sort of tucked in behind her and was like, if I'm with Emily, then I'm fine. I'm not, I'm not going, I'm
A
not
lot
going
of
to,
people had that idea. She's
yeah.
good at pacing this, and she's a fun person. So if I'm here, I'm good.
So yeah, I caught up to her on that climb, and then I was like, I'm not going to race her. I'm not going to overtake her. So I just tucked in behind. And yeah, came into Robinson feeling fresh.
So I was waiting at Robinson, and it felt like it was boiling hot. It was fairly exposed. Um, did you feel that, or was that just because I was standing there in the sun?
Wow, that's really interesting. No, I did. I mean, I had ice, so ice is amazing. It's
Yeah,
and
it is.
when it's not that hot, it's yeah, it's great. So I was soaking wet. I had ice dripping down my back. So yeah, no, I wasn't warm at all at Robinson. I wasn't cold, but I wasn't warm.
And in terms of crewing, did you have one or two crews? Was there Solomon input in that as well?
Yeah, so I had my kind of main crew was the A crew, so we're Robinson. So I had my husband and two friends, and then I had two people from Salomon at the B crew, and they were crewing Marianne, but we kind of figured that they could crew me as well at Duncan and Dusty, because we kind of figured the chances of us all going through at the exact same time was low. So they were great. They crewed all three of us Salomon athletes, Johanna as well. So yeah, and that was pretty vital actually. I wasn't planning on having a B crew until they said they could, but it was really, really nice being fully iced up and fully refreshed, especially at Dusty.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your fueling strategy and hydration and sodium and all of this sort of stuff. That were you thinking about there's so many aid stations for one. Like whenever I was pacing Ricky, it was every 3 or 5 miles you were coming into a very well stocked aid station. What was your plan with that regard?
Yeah, I've never been to a race where there's so many aid stations. It's crazy, isn't it? And like you say, they're all so well stocked, and there's so many people there to help you. It's incredible. My plan was to take my own fuel for the majority of the race, but fill up with the goo octane that they had at the aid stations. And my plan was to pick up a couple of gels at the aid stations as well, but I didn't end up doing that because I didn't need to. Um, so it was kind of to carry as little as possible without having to rely completely on the goo stuff, because I get on with it and it's fine, but I wouldn't want to take it for the whole race.
So what products were you taking, and what was your carb target?
Yeah, so I'm supported by XMiles, which is amazing, so I can have everything that I want to. So I had precision hydration, then big 90-gram pouches, SIS beta fuel, mountain fuel drink, and SIS beta fuel drink as well. They were my kind of choices. And then I had, like I said, a little bit of the goo octane as well. My aim was 90 grams an hour, and I really thought that in the heat, I would have to drop that down slightly, and focus on water, and hydration. But actually, I stuck to pretty much bang on 90 grams an hour all the way through to the race until the last sort of hour or two, which I was really surprised about. In terms of salt, I had salt caps, and I was doing around 500 to 600 milligrams per liter of water. So
And
almost like
was
an hour.
was that in terms of the sodium? Is that something that I think I've spoke to Martin before. He's been on the podcast. I know he had said at that time that hitting around 600, you're probably not going to go too far out. It's a good enough number. Were you basing it on that type of statement, or have you had like the sodium sweat test done?
Yeah, no, I think Martin would probably fire me if I got a sweat test. Yeah, no, it's based on the science around how much you generally need, and it's not, as I'm sure Martin talked about quite a lot. It's not precise. It changes quite a lot, the amount of sodium you have. The biggest indicator of the amount of sodium that you sweat is the amount of sodium you have. So there's, the body's quite good at homeostasis, so we don't need to be really, really precise about it. So yeah, 600 it's kind of around what it should be. I didn't go hyponatremic. But yeah, I didn't overdo it, and I wasn't trying to be overly precise or get obsessive about it.
I much prefer that more holistic version of hydration and sodium supplementation and stuff, because the counter to that is marketing. So it feels much more natural, Martin's take on it, which
Yeah,
is the way I would sort of think about it as well. Although I have had the test done more out of curiosity than wanting to follow it religiously.
yeah, okay.
Going into the canyons, the heat is starting to build. How are you feeling through that section? And I think it's also maybe the time that we will talk about the infamous bear story. So take us through the canyon section and how that went.
Yeah, again, I hadn't run with ice before, apart from just for like a kilometer in training, just to make sure it all was comfortable. And it's amazing. It made so much difference. I've done that canyon section in around the same heat as it was on the day, and it was just so hot and uncomfortable and, kind of scary how hot it was. But with the ice, and I had done some heat training as well, but yeah, with the ice, it was all right. Because again, the aid stations are so regular and they're so good at filling up with ice. So I was very conscious to take my time at Last Chance before the first canyon and Devil's Thumb before the second canyon to get a lot of ice in the bandana, have it everywhere. And in both of those sections, it had only just melted by the time I got out to the next aid station. So I was only just starting to get properly hot. So yeah, it was kind of a pleasant surprise that I coped, because I was really worried about it.
Yeah, it's amazing how long the ice lasts. Whenever I was filling up ice in the Mandana, it felt like after an hour there was still ice there, and after an hour you're pretty much going to be hitting an aid station again. You're close enough to another aid station. Um, you mentioned there about you did some heat training. How did you manage the heat training while car camping on the course? What did heat training look like for you?
Um, so I started off. I did the first 2 weeks or 10 days around the Rocky Chucky area. We camped at Rocky Chucky campsite, so closer to Auburn. So it started off with a little bit of heat, partly because I had just done a race when I came out. So it was kind of recovery from the race, recovery from the flight. I didn't want to go straight up to altitude because that adds quite a lot of stress to the body, and partly just to see that part of the course and to get used to the heat. Obviously, as we know, heat training helps with altitude training. It helps increase red blood cell count. So that kind of helped me to then be able to train in the high country once I got up there. So there was sort of 2 weeks of that. And then I did most of my kind of big training block at altitude or around while living at altitude. And then 2 weeks out from the race, I started running with some clothes on. So where I was staying, it was kind of mid-20s. And I didn't put like a ski jacket on and salopettes and all of that stuff. I was, trying to be sensible, trying not to give myself a heat injury. And Martin and I talked about, the best strategy, and we decided just easy runs I would wear leggings and a long sleeve winter top and a windproof and a hat. So it was uncomfortable, and sweaty and a bit gross, but It wasn't, it wasn't horrendous. I didn't finish the run feeling absolutely fried, and I was still able to recover on those easy days.
Yeah. Whenever I went out, which was 10 days before the race, Ricky and I were staying in Reno, which is about 1,400 meters, and every day we were up in Palisades. So although you had a much better acclimatization and entry into the US, I was straight into the heat, straight into altitude, and straight into running with Ricky. He was ready to race.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
wouldn't go about it the same way. Um, So going into that canyon section is where the bear encounter happened, and it was mentioned on the live stream. I think I didn't watch the live stream, but I know a lot of people had mentioned it. And whenever I met Ricky at Forest Hill, he was still like really pumped about this bear encounter. Like he wouldn't shut up about it, not in a good way, just in a like you could see there was a lot of adrenaline still kind of pulsing through him from the encounter. So the way he's described it to me was that I think you'd literally just passed him and you'd, a little bit of a gap in front of him, and then this bear came out of an opening. So why don't you take it from there and tell us it from your perspective?
yeah, I'm really glad that Ricky saw it because if I was completely by myself, I might have thought that I had imagined it because it was so surreal and it happened so fast and it was so scary. We were running down quite an open section of the course, and I just saw something out of the corner of my eye and turned around, and it was this bear charging at me down a hill. Um, and I've never seen a bear do that. It's really surprising because normally they run away or they're not bothered by you, but it was properly head down charging towards me. So I turned around and faced it because that's kind of what you're supposed to do. And I just shouted as loudly as I could, shouted, shouted, shouted. And then it veered away from me. It got to about 5 meters within me, and then it kind of veered away and then just carried on running down the hill, luckily away from the course because we were kind of veering left and it veered right. But yeah, and then I heard Ricky shouting, and I think he had probably seen it and was shouting kind of partly to warn me and partly to help scare it away. So I'm really grateful for him because I think he probably helped kind of scare it in the right direction. But yeah, I think it was absolutely terrifying, and I was running along shouting for the next sort of half hour probably, and I kept thinking I could hear something coming behind me as well. I was really paranoid about, why was it chasing me to start with? Do I smell amazing to bears or something?
Have I spilled gel? Am I just running along here smelling of sugar?
Exactly. I was like, do they really like SIS beta fuel or something? What's going on? So yeah, I was kind of, I was pretty worked up by it for quite a long time as well. I think I'd sort of half forgotten about it by the time I got to Michigan Bluff. I forgot to tell my crew about it at Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill, but they'd heard about it from the B crew who we saw at Dusty just after it happened. So yeah, and I don't know what happened after that because I kind of came through Dusty shouting about it and saying that maybe someone should go up there with a horn just in case it happens again. But I don't know. I don't know if that happened or not. I don't know how sort of seriously they took it, or if it's just a kind of normal occurrence in California.
It sounds like it was a pretty scary encounter. Like there was
Yeah.
was there like an energy dump or an adrenaline dump after that happened? Like how long did it take you to shake the thought of it and get back into the game?
Yeah, I think it took me until the climb out of the first canyon up towards um, Devil's Thumb, because all the way down the hill, I kind of forgot about the race. I was still moving really well. The good thing was I completely forgot about my legs and any aches and anything like that. I was just thinking about the bear. And I was just running along shouting to myself, what just happened? Oh my God. And just kind of trying to like process it in my mind. So yeah, but I think I didn't get the crash after the adrenaline. I definitely got the adrenaline, but I think the race and everything else kind of kept me going. I didn't get that kind of drowsiness that you sometimes get after a big shock. So that was quite good. And I think the climb up towards Devil's Thumb, I think because I was walking a bit more, so I couldn't hear my ice rattling, it made me stop looking behind me, because I think it was the ice and all the noise around running that made me keep thinking I could hear it behind me. So at that point, I kind of calmed down and started thinking about the race again.
Yeah, that's I've never heard of a bear encounter during Western States. So yeah, I'm wondering how frequent this type of thing happens.
Yeah,
So going forward then to Forest Hill, I think you picked up Ian Sharman as your pacer, who seems like if you had to pick someone with great experience at Western States, he would be one of the names that's up there. So what was it like picking him up as a pacer, and talk us through that section? I saw him at the river then, so I guess he paced you through to the river.
yeah. He picked me up at Forest Hill and dropped me off at the river. Yeah, he was amazing. He reached out after Chianti and offered to pace me, which was really, really special. Because, like you say, he's done it 10 times. He's coached countless people through it. So it was, yeah, I'm really, really lucky to have him. Um, he was great. He kept me sort of calm in that section. I think the temptation is to think, oh, there's only 60k left to go. Let's start pushing. But his advice was just to keep cruising and not kind of batter myself too much, so that there's still energy for the last section, which is really runnable. So we were moving really well coming down there, and he was making sure that I was walking up some of the steeper hills and not going too hard. I think we overtook Emily at that point, and I hadn't really noticed, but he said I had started to run a lot faster after I overtook her, because the temptation is always to overtake someone and then just sprint
Yeah,
off,
get a
attack.
gap.
Exactly, yeah. And he kind of calmed me down and was like, "No, you're doing fine. You don't need to go any faster. The pace is okay." And he knew exactly. He was like, "There's 1.4 miles until the next aid station," and he knew exactly where we were all of the time, which was really, really good. And he knew that the last section between Cal 3 and the river, which is about 8k, I think, 5 miles, he said it's going to be really tough and you're going to start feeling rubbish at that point. And that did happen, because you kind of hit the river and that's where it gets really hot. And there's a couple of little climbs. They're nothing huge, but there's no, the air kind of stops at that section, doesn't it? And it's so hot. So he kept me honest through that section. He made sure that I didn't go out too hard and I still had some energy at the river. So yeah, I was really, really lucky to have him, really grateful that he had helped.
So what in particular was it that was difficult in that section just prior to the river? Because I think it's got quite a lot of descent, that bit.
Yeah, no, I think it's just after the descent. The descent's quite fun. It's quite nice. My toes were quite sore going down that section, because there's a little bit of a steeper descent. But then you hit the bottom there, and the heat really hits you at that point. That was probably the hottest I felt. And you're almost 140 kilometers in, so it's you're starting to get pretty tired. Um, and I think the section before that is really cruisy. It's really nice and runnable. Quite a lot of it's in the shade, and then this section there's quite a lot in the sun. There's a couple of steep climbs, But yeah, I think it's the heat really. And just it being that stage in the course. I think in 100-mile races, around the 80-mile section is always quite hard. So I think you kind of,
Yeah.
it's the collision of everything, the fatigue and the heat and the fact that it's not shady.
Yeah, I think down at the river it was 38 degrees, I think, at the height of the day. And whenever I picked up Ricky at the river and paced him to the finish, but I was really expecting to get into that river and it to be, for lack of a better term, Baltic. Like I thought it was going to be so cold, like glacial water cold, and it wasn't too bad at all. I don't know if it was from standing around with an ice bandana on or what, but the river wasn't that cold. How did it feel for you getting into the river?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's not that cold. I guess it's not glacier fed, or it's warmed up quite a lot from the mountains. I had camped at Rocky Chunky campsite and swum in that river quite a lot, so I knew it wasn't going to be really cold. So I wasn't expecting that. It was quite nice though. I think I kind of just walked my hands along the rope and floated my legs down the river, so the legs got a proper break at that point, which was quite nice. I was quite glad I didn't rush through it. But yeah, it wasn't the most refreshing thing. I think, like you say, when you've had ice, then just normal water isn't that cold.
Yeah. So you've got probably 30K, around 30K still to go in the race. At what point did you start to feel like you're hunting or you're racing, you're hunting people down? Like when did that, that instinct start to kick in?
Well, I was hearing that people were close to me because I picked up my husband Matt, who was pacing me to the end, and he was, hearing from the rest of the crew that there was a kind of, I think there was a 4-minute gap or maybe a 6-minute gap at Green Gate. So I knew that there were people in front of me who, in theory, I could catch, but it's very difficult to hear that and then hunt. So I think it was probably I was moving well along that section. The kind of it's an amazing section, isn't it? It's so runnable. It's the kind of
Yeah.
1% downhill for what seems like miles. It's so nice. And I think if you can run that, then you're in a good position, because anyone who has maybe pushed a little bit too hard earlier on or is struggling for some reason can't move fast. And if you can run it at all, then you can move pretty fast. So I think I overtook Caitlin, who I really look up to. She's such an incredible runner and she's really fast. And she overtook me between Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill and looked so strong. And I was like, I'm never going to see her again. So overtaking her kind of gave me a bit of a boost. And, I realized there actually were women in front of me, because I hadn't really overtaken anyone, or I'd overtaken just Emily, I think, for a very long time. So I think, yeah, that helped. And then I was hearing that there was people fairly close in front of me. And it was quite nice. It was really nice having up to date stats on exactly where everyone was. So it felt a lot more achievable. Once I'd caught one person, I was like, well, I've made up that gap, so it's possible to make up a bigger gap elsewhere.
And were you trying to then push harder, or were you just feeling like I just have to keep moving how I'm moving and the people will come to me?
A little bit of both. I think I was able to run fairly fast, I guess. I had the energy, and I was in quite a lot of pain on the descents. There's a few, I wouldn't call them technical descents, but comparative to the rest of the course, fairly technical steep descents, and that was painful. So I kind of wanted just to get them out of the way. So I was kind of going fairly fast down those. I think once I overtook Hannah, which was at Quarry Road, she ran with me for a bit. I overtook her and then she kind of stuck with me for a bit. So that's when I started really pushing. That's when that's when things got really, really uncomfortable, because partly because I knew she was with me, so I had to kind of get away from her, but partly because I knew that Hoo Ha was, I think, 2 minutes up from her at Quarry Road, so I knew that she was close, and it's a psychological thing, but the difference between sixth and seventh doesn't mean quite as much as the difference between fifth and sixth. So then I
Yeah.
suddenly realized that top 5 might actually be an option, or a possibility. So I think that kind of gave me a bit of a kick up the arse to push. And I really worked very hard going up to Pointed Rocks and that last 10K as well.
I think top 5 feels like a podium in ultra running, or at least it should be recognized as a podium, especially whenever, we're looking at top 10 as being placing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So no, I totally get what you mean. And then in the last section of the race, then talk us through that. Talk us through, getting through to the track. One thing that I wasn't expecting was that the road was basically all uphill from the last aid station, and we had the cameras on us too. And I said to Ricky, I don't know about you, but I kind of wouldn't mind hiking a little bit of this, but there's no option to, so we just had to run it and get it done. How did you feel at that point? You started to smell the barn, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm so glad I recce'd that section, because you're right. Everyone talks about Roby Point being the high point, and then it's all downhill from there. But there's a steep hill after Roby Point, and then a really gentle one, but it doesn't feel gentle when you've been running for a long time. Yeah, it was an amazing feeling. So I overtook Who Had just before Roby Point, and I really didn't want to have to sprint around the track. I really didn't. I had to work so hard to catch her. She was going fast up that hill, and I think we ran all the way up from No Hands Bridge. And I was in quite a lot of pain. But it was amazing, because you pick up the crew as well. So I had my whole crew running with me, which was awesome. And I wasn't expecting that amount of support all the way from Roby Point onwards. There was that pub, I think, just above Roby Point, that was like a massive party and loads of lights and
Yeah.
things. Yeah, it was awesome. But I was, all the way up that climb, I was like grunting and groaning and like just saying, where is she? Where is she? Just thinking that Ho Ha would be right behind me. And the guys, the crew were like, no, she's not there. She's fine. You're okay. But I was like, no, she's going to catch me. I don't want to have to sprint around the track. So I was working really hard. But yeah, it's just incredible. And that last descent, I was running down and just starting to feel like, just starting to let it sink in, I guess, because the end feels like such a long way away until suddenly it doesn't. And I think I ran past Jim, and Jim was cheering, and I didn't notice, but then Matt was like, by the way, that was Jim Walmsley cheering you on. I was like, oh my god, it's the end, it's finishing, this is actually happening.
He didn't have his plastic horn, did he?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, and then getting to that track, it's so iconic. I've seen it 100 times in the live feed. Yeah, it's really just such a special feeling. And also the track feels so nice when you've been running on road and trail for 100 miles. So yeah, really,
Yes.
really incredible experience.
So, like, that's a hard way to finish, uphill, feeling like you are in a close race, but you ended up finishing a couple of minutes ahead of Ho Ha. So, I mean, the 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 kind of the getting after it kind of worked, and you really put a big gap in. But you weren't aware of that. You were just like head down, getting it done.
Yeah, I mean, I was told, I was perfectly aware of it really, but I didn't kind of believe anyone. I thought she was going to just come out of the darkness and race me along the track. But yeah, I think that she had worked really hard to hold me off, and when I overtook her, I think the fact that I then carried on running probably wasn't ideal for her. But I know that she's an incredibly strong runner. She's so fast up hills that I wasn't believing anyone when they said that she had dropped back. But yeah, I think that she had probably realized that she probably wasn't going to keep up with me, and she wasn't going to get caught up. So maybe she took her foot off the gas a little bit at that point.
Yeah. So you've entered the track, you're running around this track, the crowds are cheering, the live stream's going. It's this track that we've seen on, the live stream now in its fifth year. How did that feel?
Oh, so special. Like really surreal. I think you've been running by yourself for quite a long time, and suddenly everyone's there, and it's this track. And again, it's like when you go to LA or something and everything feels familiar because it's been on TV so many times, and then suddenly you're running around it. And yeah, having my crew there and everything, it was yeah, so special. I kind of forgot about the pain for a couple of minutes going around there. It was incredible.
So let's just in the wind down here, why don't we just touch on some of the gear that you used? Obviously, you're a Salomon athlete, but you do have a selection of shoes that you can choose. What was your shoe choices for the race, and did you have any swaps along the way?
I used the Salomon SAB Ultras, um, which I've raced in a lot of times before. Um, I'm really grateful for Salomon for helping me through this race. I'm a local athlete, so I didn't have access to the newer shoes very early on, and I would like to I'd like to kind of run in a pair of shoes for 6 months or so before a race in them. So I had the option. I was really happy with my choice for the ultras. I had some gravel shoes as an option to change into. I hadn't run in them loads, but they're really, really comfy. I'm trying to remember the name of them now. I can't remember the name of them, but I didn't switch into them in the end. And I didn't change shoes. I was planning on changing shoes at Michigan Bluff or Forest Hill, but my toes were sore from running down so much, I think. But my feet were okay, and I sometimes get quite a lot of pain in the sole of the foot, but they were okay. So I didn't want to change because sometimes putting dry socks and shoes on I think it kind of shrivels up the feet and it makes them worse. So I didn't change shoes the whole time, and that wasn't the plan at all. But I was okay with it.
Right. Okay. And what about the like the S-Lab Genesis? Is that a shoe that you would ever use?
Yeah, I used to race in the SF Genesis, and I really like them. They're really amazing shoes. Over the winter, I had a tib post injury, and so I've been training in the SAB Ultra because they're a lot stiffer, so they don't allow for quite so much pronation. Yeah, I'll probably change back to the SAB Genesis at some point. I really, really like them, and I've done a lot of races in them. But at the moment, my shoe of choice is the Ultra.
Yeah, I asked because I saw a lot of people using the using that shoe, and it seems to be like a super popular shoe in Europe more so than the Ultra Glide.
Yeah, yeah.
So just turning to recovery, what does July look like for you? And are we looking at a Western States UTMB double here, or?
July is going to be about recovery. I haven't run yet this week. I'm going to go for a little run this evening. We're doing a retreat this weekend, so that's going to be really exciting. So I'm going to do a little bit of running this weekend, but it's going to be mainly about recovery. Definitely nothing hard or long for a few weeks. And then, I'm going to build up and hope to run CCC. I have a place for UTMB, but I'm able to change to CCC, and I think that I've only been running ultras properly for sort of 3 or 4 years, and doing 200 milers, two really hard 100 milers in 8 weeks is maybe a little bit irresponsible for me. So I would love,
for most people.
For a lot of people, I think the Courtneys and people can do it, but I think I'm not willing to kind of put my body at risk like that. I would rather stick to longevity. So I'm gonna aim to do CCC, which I'm really excited about. It's an awesome race. The 100k distance is, I don't know if I'm fast enough for 100k at that kind of level, but we'll see.
Yeah, one of the questions that somebody submitted to me was to ask about your DNF at UTMB and what was the background to that. Is there anything that you can share?
Yeah, for sure. It's I'm kind of glad that it happened now, because I learned so much from that experience. I did the Mozart 100 in June last year, and I think I went back to running a little bit too fast and picked up a slight Achilles tendonitis, which lingered throughout June. So I didn't really run, and I couldn't even cycle because it was a bit painful cycling throughout the whole of June and into July, actually about half of July. So I started my training block to UTMB very unfit, and decided to kind of take the risk to increase, to build faster than is kind of sensible. So I went from running 0 to kind of 70 up to 100 and then up to 160 or something in 3 weeks. And then had a very high volume kind of time, just trying to build the fitness for UTMB. And the Achilles unbelievably was fine throughout all of that. I think that I probably went into UTMB slightly overtrained, slightly cooked. But I think the main issue with UTMB was I basically had a panic attack on the start line. I don't deal well with kind of loud crowds and hype and all of that. And I'd seen UTMB again on the live feed, but there is nothing that can prepare you for that kind of noise. It was awesome, but I was just terrified. It was so loud and so many people. And because of my index, I did I can't remember what they call it, the blue carpet walk up the front. So you kind of have to go in at the beginning and walk down. I didn't realize that was a thing. So I kind of just was told to go in a certain way. And then suddenly it was like I just walked onto a lit stage. Suddenly I was just standing by myself with like hundreds of cameras in my face and crowds cheering. And I just I fell apart a little bit. And I was really intimidated by the people around me, because I have imposter syndrome. I have issues with that, being, I guess, fairly new to the sport and being a local athlete and all of that. So kind of looking around and standing on the start line with all of these, proper athletes, basically just really scared me. So I kind of set off, and immediately the food wasn't going in. I was fueling, but nothing was going to my muscles. It was just sitting in my stomach. And I got basically to the first climb and realized there was something wrong. I had, really bad stomach issues, and I went hypoglycemic very quickly, basically bang on an hour and a half, which is when the glycogen stores run out, if no fuel is going to the muscles, and I kind of just crawled my way to Contamine. By the time I got there, I couldn't see. I was using my poles to stop myself falling off the path, and just absolutely fell apart, basically. And yeah, so it was kind of awful. I was kind of thinking it was worst case scenario. I'd committed quite a lot of time to go out and taken time off work and everything, to go out and train for this race, and then it fell apart before it even started, really. But I learned a lot from it, because I learned that I really need to. I talked to a sports psychologist, and I realized that I really needed to pull myself together and learn how to cope with all of the stress around racing, because it's part of racing and there's no getting away from it. And I have done that, I think, so far. We'll see. I've not gone back to UTMB yet, but yeah, I think it was a really good lesson learned.
Thanks so much for sharing that. You know, everyone has pre-race nerves, but someone at your level having to do all of this extra stuff and perform with the cameras in your face has to be just on a whole nother level. And you know, we all have anxieties and imposter syndromes and various other aspects. So thanks for going into that. But look, I guess the silver lining is your fifth place finish, and going back to Western States means you won't have to think about UTMB for a couple of years now. So
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
by the time you go back for the 6 p.m. start in Chamonix, you'll have a couple more years of experience under your belt, and you'll be better prepared for it.
Yeah.
In closing, I'd love you to tell us just a little bit about the running retreats that you've started. I think these have started quite recently, so why don't you tell us just like a little bit about that, where they take place, and what's the concept and the idea behind it?
Yeah, we have our we've done a couple of promotional retreats. We have our first actual retreat this weekend, which I'm really excited about. Um, we have we're very lucky that we live in a really amazing spot in the southwest of England, in Somerset. No one has heard of the Quantock Hills, but they're a real hidden gem. They're really quiet and peaceful, and they have their small kind of hill range, but they have a little bit of everything. They've got moorland and woodland and steep and technical and runnable. So my husband and I just really want to sort of share that with other runners. We love bringing runners together to talk about running and, to feel comfortable on the trails. So my husband actually built this house, and then he built 6 cabins in our field. So we have a really lovely off-grid space to host people. So it's a kind of a marriage of our love of hosting and our love of running. And yeah, so we have people coming down, and we'll go for a couple of runs. We'll do some strength sessions, do some Pilates, do some talks. We have some amazing guests, and just have a weekend immersed in nature and in trail running.
Yeah, sounds great. I'll stick a link to the website in the show description, so people can check that out. I have seen you running in these hills on Instagram, and they do look lovely. Not mountains, but beautiful, lush, and fields and forests and single track. So yeah, it definitely looks the spot.
Yeah, it's this very, very mini version of the Alps.
Yeah. Fiona, thanks so much for joining me to go through what was a fantastic performance at Western States. I look forward to maybe checking in with you and seeing how things go at CCC, and enjoy the rest of your summer through to then.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It was really nice to chat. And yeah, maybe I'll see you at CCC or around that area.